But we want to begin today looking at funding the circuit court system statewide, and specifically here in Brown County. Now, this is an issue that we've discussed many times on the program, circuit court funding. And remember, a little less than a year ago, the governor tried to address this in his budget proposal. Take a look at this. The governor's plan included 2 new circuit court judges, both of them for Brown County, the 3rd largest county in the state, with a large backlog of cases, about 2,800 according to the Brown County Executive Troy Streckenbach. Among the other things the governor added was proposing 76.5 new assistant district attorney positions across the state. Now, the Joint Finance Committee stripped those provisions from the budget. Ultimately, when the budget was signed, Brown County wound up with 7 new assistant DA positions. Local lawmakers here in the state then promised to address this shortfall, leading to Assembly Bill 514. This is known as the Justice for All Act. It was introduced in October. This proposal, which has a companion bill in the Senate, adds 4 circuit court judges by 2029. One of them would be for Brown County. Statewide, there would be 64.5 new assistant DA positions. But last month, that bill was amended. And among the changes, Brown County now receiving an additional circuit court judge, and there would be 68.5 new assistant district attorneys. Streckenbach telling us last week that he's going to be in Madison on Wednesday to testify in front of lawmakers on behalf of this bill. He's also told us that because of the lack of state funding in the circuit court system, which is the state's obligation, the cost of Brown County taxpayers to cover that shortfall is about $6 million a year. Reducing the backlog of cases is paramount, and that backlog has led to Brown County having to build a new jail pod this year because of overcrowding. Time is of the essence in Madison. With this being an election year, the legislature's work for the year will be concluded before April. And we welcome in Representative David Steffen of the 4th Assembly District and the author of this bill. So let's start with this news that Troy Streckenbach told me last week, that he'll be down in Madison this week testifying in front of the Judicial Committee down there in Madison. How important is that day and that type of testimony to getting this thing over the finish line?
Well, County Executive Streckenbach's involvement and testimony is incredibly necessary for this, because he's one of the people who's going to be telling my colleagues in Madison why this has to happen. So for the last 20 years, we have done a great job in Madison in terms of addressing what I would call the front end of the criminal justice system, supporting our law enforcement, putting laws on the books that support everything from protecting women from violence, elder abuse, and child sex trafficking, those sort of things. But what we haven't done is put in the necessary resources on the next stage, which is our county courthouses. And so making sure that we are properly staffing those is absolutely critical, because what is happening now is this entire system is being gummed up because of a choke point in the process in our county courthouses.
And the gummed up part of this is all the backlog of cases. In your bill, you said it's about 12,000 statewide. We've already talked about the number here in Brown County. So let me ask you this. You made these changes in December. And in those changes, you went from 4 of the additional judgeships that you have in the bill, where only 1 would have gone to Brown County. Now it's back to 2 in these amendments. That mirrors what the governor proposed in his budget proposal in February. So is that change to make it more palatable for folks in Madison to accept, or is it to make it successful in its goal, which is to reduce the problem here with the backlogs, which is, as we said, about 2,800 cases?
Yes and yes. So we've had to make changes to make other people happy in this process.
Okay.
So some of them are my colleagues, some are Democrat and Republican, some are the governor, some are other stakeholders. This is part of the process. You got to take input from other people who are part of it.
So you've done some fiscal estimates on this, which is normal for any proposed legislation. What does this tell you about the cost of this, and how does that compare to maybe the cost we saw in the governor's budget proposal back last February?
Yeah, so this total package, and just so it's clear, this will be the largest increase in staffing in our county courthouses in at least 15 years, perhaps 20 years. And it'll be about roughly $20 million a year is the estimated fiscal impact. Now, let's be clear. By putting in that money, we are also saving money in all of our county jails where we have these backlogs. Sheriff Todd Delane, our great sheriff here in Brown County, estimates that we're going to save about $10 million every single year. every single year.
Which is good because, as we've talked about on this program, Brown County taxpayers, Troy Streckenbach told us, because of the shortfall coming from the state, and it is the state's obligation to fund the circuit courts, it's costing Brown County taxpayers what they think is about $6 million a year. So that could come back to taxpayers based on what the sheriff estimates here.
That's right. And so if you can imagine that, that choke point, that clogging up of the system, the county property taxpayers are paying for that. So when an individual who normally would spend only, let's say, 3 months in a jail waiting for their day in court, well, now they may be spending a year,
if
2
not longer,
years.
yeah.
And that cost, that per day cost, is being borne not by Madison income taxpayers, it's being funded by Brown County taxpayers. And so the local impact, the local benefit is substantial financially, as well as it relates to our entire criminal justice system.
I don't want to get too inside baseball here,
Yes.
right? But this is being addressed legislatively. But to pay for it, does it have to go through the next budget process? How does this work? Who's going to pay for that increased spending that you just talked about?
This is a two-part process.
Okay.
And you will see this and have seen this in recent budget-related discussions, is that we'll have enabling legislation that kind of gives all the details of how the money's going to be spent. And then in the budget, we put the actual dollars that relate to it. I consider this actually the harder part of the process.
Okay.
And once we get it, and I'm confident we'll get it to the governor and he will sign it, this will be bipartisan, and so I feel very, very comfortable in the money being there in the next budget. Furthermore, is one of the bigger concerns that especially my party has had in the recent budget cycles is the line item veto. And if we already have a budget or a bill that's been passed, that's been blessed by the governor, Republican or Democrat, the chances of a line item veto being involved become almost nothing.
Are you confident that if you can get this process done the way you want to right now, we all know that the next budget is going to be a different looking legislature in some respects, and certainly will have a different governor. Does that concern you?
None. I have no concern about that. We thankfully, we are doing incredibly well financially as a state, so it won't be a, hey, we have to cut some things type thing. This will be part of the new money we will spend. And here's the reality is that, and you mentioned it in the very beginning, this is a constitutional requirement.
Right.
Both federal constitution as well as state constitution, that we at the state level are taking care of the system in our county courthouses. Now we call them county courthouses, but in reality, the prosecutors, the public defenders, those folks are state employees.
Sure.
And we need to make sure that we are addressing this. And there's a lot of constitutional issues that come into play, Chris, if we are not properly funding and handling this criminal justice system.
All right, can you get this over the finish line in a short amount of time? As we mentioned, by spring, by April, the legislature's work for the year of 2026 is going to be over. Can you get it done?
Yes. So in the next 3 weeks, I hope to have it on the assembly floor. I expect it to both have a hearing this week. It may even get its committee vote yet this week. And so it'll be ready for the floor before the end of January. The Senate, as usual, just tends to lag a little bit. They have more to work with less people over there. So
But Senator Wimberger has his companion bill ready to go as well.
It's ready to go.
It's already moving as well.
It's tracking at the same pace throughout the system. And so that's good. Now, I can never guarantee 100% success, but we have had a wonderful response to it because people understand that we have this responsibility and that we've done this great job on the front end, but we have not addressed properly all these costs, all these constitutional issues that exist in our courthouses.
Well, David Stephan, we wish you the best of luck. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.